obviously a positive movement in organic agriculture. If we zoom into the Idaho picture, you can see that number of farms actually increased quite a bit, and acres were only up slightly though. I think a lot of folks probably don't have a huge acreage in organics, but a lot of people are giving it a test run, and sales were up 10% from 2016 to 2019. So let's look at how Idaho compares to other states. And when you look at the number of farms, I don't know why there's 11 here. I think I must have missed Canada. I meant to do a top 10, but Idaho didn't make the top 10 for number of organic farms. And I think the column is switched 2019s to the right now. On my screen, people's videos are showing up or covering that right column. Is that happening for other folks too? Or can you see the 2019 column?
No, I can see your full screen, Randy.
Okay, good. Maybe it's just because I'm the presenter. Okay. However, Idaho does make the list for land in organic production. So we're down here. We are in the top 10 for organic production. And you can see how we compare. California is a continent unto itself in organics, but we're right in there with a lot of the other states. So these are ranked by sales, organic sales, and Idaho makes the top 10 for organic sales. And you can see the top 10, account for 75% of all organic sales in the US. So Idaho is contributing to the top 75% of sales in the US, or 75% of the sales. So we do definitely have an organic cluster up in the Pacific Northwest, definitely, and then with California joining, and then you see over kind of to around the Great Lakes there, a lot of organics. So, and I should let you know, I'm very open to questions at any time. I don't mind being interrupted. So if you have a question, just speak up, please, and we'll just talk about it. We'll just go well. So, all right. So these are the top states for organic and organic livestock and poultry product sales. And I want to make a clarification there. This isn't the animals themselves. These are animal products. So actually, when you include the animals, you're going to see a slide in a minute that has numbers that are bigger than what you're seeing here for Idaho, because the animals are included as well. But Idaho is an important producer of organic livestock products. So this is the breakdown of organic livestock product and animal production. The title is a little misleading there. Animals are included here. So on the previous slide, Idaho was 125 million for animal products. If you add if you add these up, you're going to come up with about 139 million, because the animals are included here as well, the sale of organic animals. My background is featuring dairy, because dairy is the #1 commodity in Idaho, both organically and traditionally. And you can see milk from cows is by far where most of the sales are generated for organic livestock production. Probably no surprise. So before I move to the next slide, where we're going to start to look at crops, think about what might be the biggest organic crop in Idaho, and a clue would be on this slide. It's a big hint. All right, moving forward. Biggest organic crop is hay, alfalfa, and alfalfa mixtures, because cows that produce organic milk need to eat organic hay. So that is the biggest commodity, organic commodity for Idaho. And That's not a change from 2016 to 2019, though production is up considerably.
We do have a
43%.
question about that production jump, Randy, and
Sure.
there's other voices on the call that may be able to weigh in, because the question is about are there speculations, or has there been, is it clearly understood why there's been such a tremendous jump in the last, since the last survey?
For milk
for
or
organic
for
milk
alfalfa,
sales.
for both?
For organic milk sales. So what the cows are eating,
Right.
not what the cows are eating. Any ideas
Well,
there?
I would throw that out to the group because I guess I didn't give that disclaimer, but we report the data, we don't analyze it. So,
Yeah.
That's outside of my purview to analyze. I could give you my personal opinion, but I can't give you an official.
Of course.
This is Gwen. I can maybe answer. I'm Gwen, the organic program manager for the Idaho State Department of Agriculture. And, you know, there was a huge growth just across the board in organic milk in that like 2016, 2017 time. I know that, and I think it was because organic milk prices got really high. So obviously when you have a lot of high prices, like that encourages people to come in and produce. And so in that 2016, 2017, some in 2018, like we saw a huge jump in the number of new organic dairies that wanted to get certified. And so it was kind of a whole big thing that happened around that time, different market things. So that's, I mean, that's what I saw. I don't know all the factors that go into it, but that was probably part of that jump.
Not to linger on this point, but I'm just curious, Gwen, do you have an idea of what companies were driving that demand?
I don't. I mean, here in Idaho, a lot of dairies are very large and go to huge milk processors. So it's not as much the like bottle your little bottle of milk and sell it at the local stand. So I think it was probably related to big national trends. And there's a lot of companies involved, but because it was a big national thing, I think there was a lot of different companies that got involved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gwen. And I'm sorry, this is Cindy Curl. I asked that question. Randy, you said you also had a theory. Is that the same theory? It wouldn't be the official opinion, but was that your same theory?
My personal opinion is I know a lot of people who are drinking organic milk now, so I think there's some demand, you know, that would drive production, would drive supply. So a lot of people are just looking for what they believe might be a more nutritious product. I'm not sure if there's data that shows that, but you know, it's just people are drinking organic milk now.
Thanks.
It looks like there was also a question from the Facebook Live feed. Someone was asking why the organic milk production went up, but the feed amount went down.
So I can jump in on this too. If you look at his slide, it's talking about crop sales. And so most organic dairies grow their own crops to feed their own cows. And so that wouldn't be considered a sale because they're growing the crop to feed to their own cows. So I think that's probably a really big explanation in there is that this is just people who are selling this hay to other people, not on-farm use.
I would agree with that answer. So this is sales, as Gwen pointed out. With our normal survey programs, we also report a value of production number, and I don't have that here for organic. It wasn't published in that form, but that would include hay grown to be fed right to livestock that was never sold when you have a value of production number. But this is just value of sales, what was sold. And a lot of hay is not sold. It's just fed right to the animals on the farm where it's grown.
Randy, I did have one other question from Facebook, which is, are they correct in looking at the numbers that you shared that there are fewer organic farms than in Idaho, but they're bigger now than they used to be?
I think number of farms did increase, but there does seem to be more larger farms. Though you look at that second line there for potatoes, and I didn't comment on this earlier when you might have seen a D. The reason we have a D there in potatoes for 2016 is because there were too few large farms, and we have a rule, we have to have at least a certain number of farms before we'll publish the data, because we try not to disclose individual operation data. So we need to have a certain number of farms. And in 2016 for potatoes, there weren't enough potato farms that we were comfortable publishing the number. So that would indicate there's more potato farms in 2019 because we could publish the number.
Thanks for
Other
listening.
questions?
I was just gonna say, there's another milk question in the chat. Does the value of milk sales include all milk produced on organic dairies, whether sold for organic or normal processing?
I believe it does, but I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it does. If you would like me to know for certain, I can follow up on that. Other questions?
I'm not seeing anyone in the chat, so if you want to continue,
All
I
right.
think we can proceed.
So not a huge surprise, probably potatoes is number 2. It is the number 3 commodity in Idaho for value of production. Cattle and calves are second behind dairy, and then potatoes is number 3. So it's a very commonly grown crop in Idaho, and we grow potatoes very well here. And then as you move down the line, you start to see some more feed items that would probably go into organic dairies. And then other items that are just very recognizable in Idaho, dried oval beans and onions. If there's no questions, we'll move on. And I tried to put a lot of crops up here because I know people that are attending might be growing different crops, and they probably want to see where their crops sits in Idaho. But floriculture and bedding crops. Going down to peppers, and then again, we had data reported in 2016 for peppers, but we had too few of operations to report it. And apparently we didn't have any significant oat production reported in 2016. So continuing down. Now we're starting to get down. So this is interesting. We had significantly more sales in some of these crops like herbs and nursery crops in 2016 than in 2019. So big drops. And a big increase in snap beans. And again, I don't know why on herbs and nursery, why the big decreases. So that's all the data I had to share. I'm certainly willing to answer more questions or be part of a discussion. Some of you might have answers that I don't have, of course. You've weighed in already, and Gwen's been very helpful. This is my contact information. If you're looking for data, I can sure help you. If you're looking for analysis, again, that I can give you opinions, but I can't give you an official reason. And all the data is on our website if you're brave and want to go try to dig it out yourself. If otherwise, just give me a call. I don't mind digging the data out for people and getting it to them. So other questions or comments or discussion?
Feel free if you have other questions, either put them in the chat or come off mute. And while we're leaving a little bit of room for any more questions before we turn it over to hear some updates and changes that will affect organic producers in Idaho, just wanted to make a plug for the Organic Integrity Database, which is a great tool where you can find farm level data on who's growing what, where, because producers opt into it. As a comparison, the National Ag Statistics Service is never going to provide a farm level data. That's why they can't report if their numbers are too small, that it could make it easy for a person viewing the data to identify where the data came from. So I'll put that in the chat. It's really fun, whether you're looking to source something or looking to see who grows something. And again, it gives you that farm level data. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gwen.
All right, thank you. Yes, we use the Organic Integrity Database all the time and highly suggest it. And obviously, if you love numbers, the NASS information is really fun to look at. So I'm just going to give a quick little update about some changes that have happened. This is not necessarily specific to Idaho. These are more across the board organic. So if you're not from Idaho, this might also apply. As I said, I'm Gwen. I'm the program manager for the organic part of the Idaho State Department of Agriculture. We certify about 70% of the operations in Idaho. So currently there's 381 as of like a few days ago operations in Idaho. There's 14 different certifiers that certify in Idaho. So that is a question we get a lot. People think that, oh, just Idaho, we do all of Idaho. We do most of Idaho, but as you can see, there's some other ones. Sorry if that's a little blurry. The next biggest certifier that operates here is Oregon Tilth and Organic Certifiers, and then there's a spattering of other ones. And so with organics, a certifier can operate anywhere. We're not bound by state boundaries. We even actually certify a few operations outside of Idaho. So significant number. As far as just for the scope, here's kind of looking at currently, and some operations might have more than one scope, so that's why the numbers won't add up exactly, but there's 261 crop operations, 48 livestock, 2 wild crop, and 136 handlers. So definitely a crop heavy state, but we actually have a significant handler as what like food processors like bakeries or, dairy processors that make cheese. Those are what we consider handlers. So in 2020, there weren't too many huge changes to the organic regulations. Just this tamarind seed gum was added to this national list in December, and that's very specific to handling operations as a product that could be used in processed organic products. There was also a change in the way that the NOP, and when I say NOP, I mean the USDA National Organic Program. That is the USDA federal part that oversees organic certification. They changed a way that they recognize certified items imported from India. So doesn't affect most people, but if somebody was importing an item from India, there is more information there at this link, and obviously anyone can reach out to me if they have further questions on that. But as some of you may have heard, there is a potential big change coming. It's called Strengthening Organic Enforcement, SOE. And this has been in the works for a couple of years. its overall purpose is to like strengthen this oversight and enforcement of the production, handling, and sale of organic agricultural products. And it's really meant to focus on improving integrity in the organic supply chain and sort of this farm to market traceability. We've already had that in place, but it's just closing some little gaps that have become evident as the industry has grown, and giving the USDA some more enforcement capabilities. So the USDA published this in August, and it was open for public comment. And so some of the things, I mean, this is a very big rule. If it actually gets implemented, which it hasn't happened yet, but if it goes through, there's a lot of changes. Most of the changes will be kind of seen on this handling side, where there's going to be stricter requirements for who has to be certified. So for example, brokers. In the past, they had an exemption. So these are people that kind of are just facilitating sales, or maybe they transport, but sometimes brokers don't even handle the product. But they're now going to have to be certified. And so that's probably going to be one of the largest changes that we see. There's also going to be some paperwork requirement changes. So for example, like a receipt, when you sell something as organic, it's going to have to be identified as organic. Before, if you're selling potatoes, your receipt could just say potatoes, but now it might have to say organic potatoes. That helps with that record keeping traceability. There's some changing to import-export situations. Another thing that if any of you have dealt with organics, you'll notice that every certifier has a different certificate, and it's a different format, and it can be kind of confusing to look at all these different ones. But in this organic integrity database that Christina pointed out, the plan is to have all certificates generated in that, so they're all going to look the same, and they'll be available in the integrity database, which is not currently the case. So that would be a big change to those in that realm. However, before anybody starts worrying or getting too excited, that this is just still in this proposed rule stage. So the comment period ended in October, and as part of a rulemaking process, then the USDA takes all those public comments, and there were a lot of them, and they go through and they make edits and changes. So the things I said that are included, who knows, they might still be in it, they might get taken out. Like, I don't know. We don't know where it will actually end up. But if you want to like look into it, get some more information, you can find that on the web. You can just do an internet search, or this link here is the link for the specific regulation information. It's very, very long if you like to get into those details. But once if and when it becomes a finalized rule, then for certified operations, your certifier will reach out to you and let you know if anything's going to affect your operations. So that's kind of a thing to keep in mind. But until then, we're just sort of preparing the other proposed rules put out by the NOP, like an example of one for livestock. Went through this whole process and then in the end didn't get implemented. So it's just a tentative plan, but I do have high indications that it's probably going to pass, or at least most of the pieces of it are going to end up going through. Another change that kind of happened is changes in cost share. So cost share has been around for a long time. Each farm bill has included it. I don't know when the first cost share was, but the last ones that I've been around for had cost share. So the 2018 Farm Bill included cost share again, and this is an opportunity for organic farmers to get reimbursed for some of the certification costs for organic certification. It's currently administered by the USDA's Farm Service Agency, the FSA. And so in the Farm Bill, and what it's been all in the past, is that organically certified producers could get reimbursed up to 75% of certification costs, up to $750 per scope. Per scope means crops, livestock, handling. But in August 2020, FSA reduced the amount of cost share reimbursement available. They changed it to 50% for a maximum of $500. So the reasons that I heard were that there was a lack of funding, and they wanted to make sure that there would be enough funding for people. It was a shock. Us certifiers didn't know it was coming. Maybe some people knew, but it was pretty, that was towards the end of the cost share period year, which runs from like October to October. And so it was a bit of a surprise. I hadn't heard about any changes, like any lack of funds. And so it was very confusing. And I tried to get some information from FSA. I went to some webinars last year, and a lot of questions kind of got dodged. So I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, I don't have more information for any of you as to what's going to happen in 2021. If you are certified and have questions, you can reach out to your certifier, or you can contact the FSA office, which there's usually FSA offices in each county, which is really nice. And that's across the country, it's not just Idaho. So I encourage people to reach out to FSA. People who are really fired up and care about that, I also encourage them to reach out to your representative to let them know that, you know, what your opinions are on the reimbursement amounts.
And
so
I'll just interject to say that there's a grassroots effort nationally to recoup the full funding level that was authorized in the 2018 Farm Bill, which would reinstate the 75% compensation max. So if you're interested in getting the talking points for that, please reach out to me and I'll make sure you get them.
Yeah, so we'll see. As far as I know, the 50% 500 is what's in place. I haven't heard that that's getting changed for this year, but who knows?
When there's a question from Facebook about the previous, I guess 2 slides ago from the proposed certification changes, someone was asking if folks who aren't involved in agriculture can comment on changes like that, and where they could find the proposed changes and how to comment.
Yeah, so I'm assuming they're talking about the strengthening organic enforcement changes. That is totally public comment. And so that's open to anyone. And when I looked through some of them, some are just a consumer that cares or about one thing or another. Some are maybe like industry people who care. So any change to like federal regulations are open to anybody. You don't have to be specifically in that. The hard part is knowing what's changing when. That happens all the time. So I would say this comment period's over, but there's a possibility that there could be a second comment period. Yeah, I don't know. But the way that I encourage people, if you're specifically interested in organics, is the USDA has like an email newsletter called Organic Insider. And I don't have the link here, but you could probably search Organic Insider. And that's a great way if you care about what's happening with the USDA organic regulations. Sign up for that. They don't spam you. You don't get emails every day. So I think they do a good job of only sending out those email newsletters when it's something important, maybe like 1 or 2 a month. And that'll let you know when there are changes and comment periods. Otherwise, if you're just interested in laws across the regulations across many areas, there might be some things that you can sign up for, Federal Register notifications or things like that. But there's a lot of things that change all the time with the federal government. So for organics, the Organic Insider is my best hint towards that. But as far as I know now, the public comment period closed. I don't know if there's any other way right now to comment on it. That would have to, you might have to look on the internet or do things like that. So some other resources besides that Organic Insider, if the USDA National Organic Program created what they call an Organic Integrity Learning Center, which has these free courses on many topics. It's mainly, I think, aimed at certifiers and or certified operations, but you know, if you're really interested in learning about some nitty-gritty parts of like regulation and how it's done on the ground, you can sign up at this learning center. So here's the where you can find that at, and there are some neat opportunities with that. So I think that's a fun resource that is just kind of new in the last few years, and they've really ramped it up in the last year or so. So that's kind of all the updates I have for now. Totally open for questions of all sorts. And then if you're interested in anything or have further questions, feel free to reach out to us. This is the ISD Organic Programs number and email and our website. But of course, like I said, we're only one certifier of many. So if you're located in a different area, if you're certified by a different certifier, they could answer questions too, but I'm always happy to explain anything about organics. So I can take time for questions or can move on.
So leaving a little bit of space in case anyone had questions from Gwen's presentation or from Randy's presentation. I did think it would make a good closing to open the floor up to anyone who's joined us today to talk in personal terms about how we feel organic is, how we feel about where organic is in Idaho. And I had a topic in mind that I'm interested in talking about, which is in particular organic research that has strong support and backing from public universities. So wanted to plant that seed, but then also see if there were any topics generally that people have been thinking about when it comes to organic. And it can be generally or specific to Idaho. And since I have a captive audience, I can continue to just throw out little seeds that we can follow up with further conversation down the road and continue to talk about as a community. We are just coming off 2 days of other programming. We had a session all about how to get into becoming organically certified for growers who aren't organically certified, and had some great conversations with farmers that are interested in transitioning, but that are already using a lot of the practices because they recognize that they're a better way of farming, and that it's less work if you get to a point where it's manageable. And particularly what I'm getting at is there's been more and more people interested in talking about the accessibility of organic food, which is something I know NCAP and personally I'm really passionate about talking more about. because for the last, it has not, when was the organic program established? I think it was in like, someone's,
The final rule was in 2002.
yeah, so not very long, almost 20 years old. So like actually something that's younger than me. That's great. It has not been around for very long, and for a long time, it's maturing now, but for a long time, it was all about getting a higher return, which is still important because farmers a lot of times still don't make a wage that reflects the important role they hold in society. But organic food, with a lot of studies that has come out, there's a market, and I didn't prepare this very well, so you'll have to bear with me. But those of you who know me probably already know what I'm saying. Like, why isn't organic food more accessible to more Idahoans, to more people everywhere? And why does it often get pigeonholed as being only for select groups of people? I think we know what we're talking about when I'm saying that. And I think it's a conversation that we need to continue to get better at having as a community, and just couldn't pass up the opportunity to say something about it here. And no one's chimed in with any other questions. Does that mean you want me to keep going?
Christina, I can just jump in for a little bit. We were talking about how we had some conversations with some farmers in the last few days that are interested in transitioning to organic but haven't made the switch yet. And I just thought it was really interesting to hear kind of the firsthand accounts of people talking about how they'd been spraying and the weeds had grown resistant to the herbicide they were using, or the insects weren't dying off anymore. And so they had to switch pesticides, and they were constantly trying to figure out, how much to use or increase their usage and then switch a chemical, and just feeling like that wasn't a good model. Another farmer was talking about how the soil just felt barren at the end of the season. And it just seemed like that was wrong to him, even though he didn't really have a lot of information yet about how to make the transition. We heard a story about a farmer that bought a bunch of Roundup Ready GMO seeds because his neighbors were using them, and he figured that just made sense so that there wasn't, any conflict there. And he spilled it. And when he was transporting the seeds across the farm, he spilled a bunch and was like, oh, well, the birds will just pick those up. And like months later, the seeds were just still lying there on the ground. The birds didn't want to eat them. And so just little anecdotal stories that were interesting to me. And we did get one question from the Facebook feed, which is, why does organic milk taste better than conventional milk? And she said, ignore if this is off topic, but it was reminding me of a chef that we worked with for an event in Idaho a few years ago. And the catering company that we were working with agreed to let us bring them a bunch of produce from the organic farms that were a part of this event. And he was just shocked when he started testing the produce ahead of time to make his meals, and said, there's so much more flavor in the produce that you're giving me. I don't need to use as much spices or do as much to them because the taste is just superior, and made the transition to their catering company using more local organic produce. So I don't have an answer exactly to the milk question, but I do think it's interesting that people are noticing the superior quality. So
yeah. 31% market increase in 3 years is no small amount. I know that there's a lot of good research going into organic markets,
but none of that really answered to your question, which is how do you make organic more accessible to more people? And I think that's a huge conversation, and it's really an important topic to be discussing.
Does anyone else reflect on that while they're getting ready for the weekend?
I think about it all the time, Christina. This is Cindy Curl. I'm a professor of community and environmental health at Boise State, and I run the agricultural health lab here. And I think an awful lot about organic foods accessibility and about organic foods kind of stigmas in some groups groups versus cache in other groups, and which parts of organic foods benefits are important drivers in people's purchasing habits. And I think it's hard to talk about organic food without talking about who it's available to and who it's not available to. It's hard to talk about equity in organic food without acknowledging the higher prices, but it's also impossible to talk about growing organic food without recognizing all the different reasons that it costs more to grow that way. So I think I agree it's such an important conversation to have, but I don't know how we make it more accessible without changing large scale structures.
Yeah, it's definitely not something we're going to solve in the next 9 minutes. Is it?
Yeah, Christina, I think about it a lot too. This is Amy Mateus of the Sun Valley Institute for Resilience and Local Food Alliance. And obviously working within local food systems, like the difference between organic and local is obviously like real. And a lot of people don't really recognize it. It's just like the assumption that if it's local, then it's organically grown. And if it's organic, then it's better if it's local. And I think there's just a lot of like consumer confusion around it. And it's like the privilege to be an educated consumer is like extremely real. And we think a lot about how like if you could impact the school food programs, that's kind of the way of being more inclusive in general. And whether that's trying to figure out what are the cost shares or how can we subsidize the difference between organic product and commodity food product. And, you know, we're obviously located in a wealthier part of the state where we think we could get that kind of donor support. But also knowing that there's a lot of hoops to jump through with bureaucracy of Department of Defense certifications and GAP certifications, and all of that just adds to the burden for farmers. So we understand why the cost is more, but we're trying to figure out how do you address the cost? And a lot of it is building efficiency into systems, helping smaller farmers become more efficient, be able to produce at a scale where they can sell it affordably, because you don't want to undercut the producer either. Right. And we definitely think about it a lot. Absolutely no solutions at all, but would love to be involved in conversations with thinkers on it and how we can really make a difference going forward.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of conversation, both from the farmers and even us certifiers talking with USDA, because really it really comes down mostly to costs in one sense. Is just when you have a system where people have to get regulated, there's costs associated with that. And then all these other things down the line, you know, that build up, and then we see cuts in cost share, which is already, you know, can be somewhat small. It helps smaller farmers, but those mid-sized ones, $750, you know, it might be a drop in the bucket. And so I've heard a lot of people talk about pressuring like the federal government, where there's a lot of subsidies that go to agriculture, and is organic getting its fair share, you know, and that, so I can't advocate one way or another, but that's a big thing that I've heard a lot of people say, is like to start talking at the federal level about subsidy issues.
Yeah, the pot of money for agriculture that is set aside or indicated through specific channels for organic or sustainable agriculture. When I look at the numbers, I'm always just like, how can it be like less than 1%? There's a long way to go on the policy front. Either appropriating money or passing new policy.
Gwen, you started talking about it, but we did get a question about the difference in subsidies for organic versus non-organic, and are they similar or not?
I am totally in the organic world, so I can't give any specifics about that comparison. I'm sure that's out there, and it's not to say that just because you're organic, you know, if you're a huge organic soybean grower, they might be also getting those standard soybean subsidies, you know, so I don't know kind of how that all filters out, but just kind of relaying that the general sense from a lot of people is that, you know, sometimes organics is getting a little bit left behind, or a lot of times these fruits and vegetables are considered like specialty crops, and sometimes those are left out of the really large subsidies that go to these like soybean, corn, kind of large commodity crops. Or so there, you know, there's talk there too of like where that lies, and I wish I knew the exact numbers, but I don't.
It just makes me think a lot of conversations around CARES funding with COVID response, and how that there was a lot of money that went into the ag sector, and there's continuing to be conversations about how equitable the funding was around the topics of crop portfolio and size, organic being part of that. And it, you know, it's the stories are coming out in the mainstream media about how it's continuing to be the larger production, larger scale producers that are able to file the paperwork and get it done to get the relief, which is important for them to get at, you know, in some regard. But back to that question of size and equity and how it's being, yeah, it's a bit of a mess when it comes to trying to keep track of subsidy programs in the US and who actually benefits from them. And there's good work being done around critiquing them, but in terms of restructuring them, because the main crops that get commodity subsidies are the big tidal, like soybeans, corn. Those are the main two, and that makes up a huge portfolio, like chunk of the US ag portfolio, right? I don't know where I'm going with this, but we've talked about systems level changing. It might be good to kind of bring us back to relational scale work, because I think that is easier to grasp and easier to make sense of and less overwhelming, especially when we get into like large systems level thinking so easily when it comes to talking about ag and food. But really stepping back, thinking about small actions, it can be helpful. A story that, Amy, you made me think of with trying to get more food into the school district there in Blaine County here in Sun Valley. The first effort of its kind that I'm aware of, the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils is purchasing 25 CSA's shares from Global Gardens here in Boise. And then it's an 18-week CSA season, and they're going to be driven to Canyon County and distributed to farm workers that don't work on organic farms, that don't view organic food as accessible or even for them, but also face a disproportionately high exposure rate to pesticides given their profession. And I don't think that's the answer. It can't be, right? Like a nonprofit getting $5,000 to pay a small incubator farm to get, like, there's got to be a simpler way. And with that, we're at the top of the hour. And I know I've talked a lot, but I'll just close this out by saying that I'm always here to talk about ag and food related issues in Idaho, organic or otherwise. Also want to extend a big thank you to Randy Welk and Gwen Aries for downloading your knowledge into us. It's good to have those numbers. It's good to have them as a backdrop for good conversations, and it's always great to connect with people who care about organics in Idaho.